Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome if you're new. Thank you for taking time out of your day to check the video out. We have more PlayStation news, rumors, and leaks to go over and cover today, and we are starting with Gamescom Opening Night Live. The show is actually happening tomorrow, but we have confirmation that a major first-party PlayStation title is set to make an appearance. Over on Twitter, we have Jeff Keighley saying games confirmed for Gamescom Opening Night Live on Tuesday. Call of Duty Black Ops 7, Resident Evil Requiem, Ghost of Yotei, Ninja Gaiden 4, The Outer Worlds 2, Silent Hill F, World of Warcraft Midnight, and more, plus Fallout Season 2 and Clair Obscur Expedition 33 music performance. So this, I think, caught some people by surprise because I think most of us were assuming that Sony maybe wasn't going to show up at all during Opening Night Live. But we are getting confirmation that we're going to be seeing something new for Ghost of Yotei. Now, he did release a hype trailer, and the first thing you see in that hype trailer is what seems to be a couple seconds of a cinematic for Ghost of Yotei. So based on that, I'm thinking we might end up getting a new story trailer for Ghost of Yotei during the show tomorrow. But generally speaking, it seems like Gamescom Opening Night Live is actually going to be really good this year, even just based off of the games that are confirmed to be there already, you know, not even counting new announcements or surprise announcements. It's seeming like it's going to be a very solid show overall, which is good because I feel like Opening Night Live the past couple years has been on the weaker side. So I will be tuning in and I will be streaming this, obviously, so you can feel free to come hang out with me and, you know, we'll check it out together. But something else that's apparently going to be revealed by Sony during Gamescom is a new accessory. This is being reported by WCCF Tech. According to reliable leaker Bill Kuhn on Dia Labs, Sony is set to reveal a new headset in its in-zone lineup of accessories at Gamescom 2025, with the in-zone H9 II, the successor to 2022's in-zone H9, potentially being announced during Gamescom 2025's Opening Night Live showcase. The in-zone line of accessories was first launched in 2022, with Sony releasing headphones and monitors and then showcasing them during EVO 2022. We've already had a follow-up release of monitors, with Sony releasing OLED variants of its in-zone monitor line. Dia Labs also includes a spec chart for the new rumored H9 II headphones, which shows a few significant changes, like the new model having a detachable mic, support for the latest Bluetooth standard, and weighing far less than the original H9 headphones. So apparently they are going to be coming in both black and white, and this is a very premium headset because pricing, at least based off of this leak, it's going to be coming in at 350 euros. So yes, it's going to be a very expensive headset, but there you go. That is, I assume, another announcement we're going to be getting from Sony during Gamescom. But we're going to move on to the next topic, and this is one that I feel as though went under the radar, but if you're somebody who was excited for the Last of Us multiplayer title that was unfortunately canceled or played The Last of Us multiplayer, you might be interested in this topic. So it says here, The Last of Us Online was a project that many fans of the series were excited about, since there are still people who, to this day, play the faction's multiplayer mode that launched with the original game in 2013. But Naughty Dog decided it didn't want to be a multiplayer-focused studio and ended up canceling the project after years of development, to the disappointment of fans and the developers at Naughty Dog who worked on the project that saw its potential, including former game director of the project at Naughty Dog, Vinit Agarwal, who in a recent interview with GameSpark spoke about how one of the reasons he left after a decade with the studio was that he saw, quote, the potential of combining Naughty Dog's specialty cinematic action with multiplayer, end quote, after his time working on The Last of Us Online and every other project he was on at Naughty Dog. My main titles were Uncharted 4: A Thief's End, Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, and The Last of Us Part 2. I worked on both multiplayer and single player. I was mainly in charge of boss battles, and Naughty Dog's boss battles are generally one-on-one situations, so I wanted players to feel like they were fighting a human player, not an AI, even in single player. To be more specific, I worked on the final boss in A Thief's End and the fight between Ellie and Abby in The Last of Us Part 2. I used all my knowledge of multiplayer to create the feeling that you were fighting a human. A big part of what inspired me to go independent was seeing the potential in combining Naughty Dog's specialty cinematic action with multiplayer. Agarwal has set up a new international studio between the United States and Japan with another Naughty Dog writer and former creative director, Joe Pettiani, who will be running the US office, while Agarwal will be based in Japan. The official name of the studio has yet to be announced. The new title, which Agarwal describes as triple indie, is still early in its development, only being a few months along at the time of this writing. There's not much we can say yet, but the new game is a multiplayer game, and we aim to bring the cinematic action we've been familiar with from our previous titles to multiplayer. We're already in contact with partners, and we expect to have more information to share in the future. So yeah, this is something that, again, if you were at all interested in the Last of Us multiplayer game that was canceled, you're going to want to pay attention to this, because the team that was working on that essentially ended up forming their own independent studio, and they're clearly going to take everything that they put into this game, aside from the actual, Last of Us universe and Last of Us name, and put it into this new project. Apparently, they're already playing the game. At least that's what he said in this interview, and they're enjoying it. And so, I don't want to overhype this or make people assume that this is going to be as good as what the Last of Us multiplayer was going to be, but I do find it very interesting that they believed in what they were making so much that they were like, you know what, we're just going to have to do it ourselves. And yeah, this is something I'm going to be paying close attention to. But moving on to the next topic, speaking of Sony's live service, there was a situation that occurred over the weekend where it seemed as though Fairgames may have been canceled. Fairgames is the upcoming multiplayer title developed by Haven Studio. And so the source of this, or the original source, was Michael Pachter during his Pachter Factor podcast episode. He said they turned all of their studios into live service developers, but that resulted in Concord being shut down and the developer closed, which then resulted in Jade Raymond being let go and Fairgames being canceled. So he says it pretty matter-of-factly that Fairgames was canceled, and again, this was being reported on because none of us had heard that Fairgames was canceled. We did hear about Jade Raymond leaving, but then we have Destin Legary, a former IGN editor, reaching out to Michael Pachter, and Michael Pachter clarified, saying, "I misspoke, said Jade was let go, and assumed it was canceled. I have no info on the game at all. So feel free to quote this, I truly don't know." So there you go. If you were wondering if Fairgames is safe, although I'm not sure that many people are really excited for this game or anticipating it, it's still in development. As of right now, it has not been canceled, but I have to admit, I would not be surprised if it does get canceled at some point in the future. Apparently, Sony did some kind of play test with this game with PSN, or on the PSN with PlayStation players, and the feedback was not good. So yeah, I don't know. I will keep you guys updated with that. But moving on from that, we have a new multiplayer title that is leaving early access. This is a game that's actually published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. Midnight Murder Club, the new first-person shooter from Knockout City developer Velen Studios and published by PlayStation, has a surprise launch out of early access. This was actually, I think, yesterday or the day before. But it says, similar to how Velen Studios took Dodgeball, a game most people are introduced to when they're kids, and gave it more of an intense spin with Knockout City, the team has turned hide and seek into a much more intense and violent time with Midnight Murder Club. The game takes place in a pitch-black mansion where players have to navigate the darkness through audio cues. And so the game director at Velen Studios said in a PlayStation blog, the team wanted to make it more violent, or a more violent version, I should say, of hide and seek, and make it feel like a party game where it's tense and spooky one moment, then chaotic and funny the next. So it arrived on PC in early access on March 13th, but unfortunately it reached a peak concurrent player count of 170 players. So, I'm sure most of you listening to this weren't even aware of this game's existence, but it is a game that was published by Sony, and it's out now. So I can't say that I played it, and I'm not sure that I'm going to. But in case you're interested, it's out now, and let me know if you did play it in early access. Moving on to the next topic, we're talking about Mafia The Old Country. This is coming from Push Square. They say almost half of all Mafia The Old Country copies were sold on PS5, according to sales estimates from Sensor Tower. The data tracker predicts the single-player narrative game has sold 800,000 copies since launch, with 48.67% of those on PS5. A further 37.86% are predicted to have sold on Steam, with just 13.47% on Xbox. The large split in favor of PS5 makes sense, as PlayStation players have generally gravitated towards cinematic single-player campaigns. Despite being set in a small open world, Mafia The Old Country is largely a linear story-based game. With many people now wrapping up the plot, developer Hangar 13 has announced they will be adding more content to the release for free in the near future. So yeah, just figured I would take a moment to let you guys know about this because Mafia The Old Country is a game that honestly I've been hearing pretty good things about. Not like overwhelmingly good, but basically people are saying it's a solid 7.5 out of 10 game. It's, on the shorter side, 10 to 12 hours, but it is $50. It is linear, which I actually think is great because we don't really get many linear cinematic games these days, or single player games. So I'm not surprised to hear that it did best on PS5. And, I just wonder, hearing 800,000 copies sold, that's very close to 1 million. I would assume it will be able to reach that million point. Is that enough to make the game break even or make it profitable? How is Hangar 13 feeling about that? How is Take-Two Interactive feeling about that? I guess we'll find out, but there you go. Just a little update on Mafia The Old Country. But moving on to the next topic here, apparently Sony is pledging to improve the PlayStation Store. Sony has promised to continue improving the PS Store with the ultimate aim of making it easier for players to find games. The company made this pledge in a new blog post that seems like it was written for corporate consumption rather than players, but given the state of the PlayStation Store, we can't help but get our hopes up a little bit. The blog boasts about features that Sony has introduced over the last few years to make the PS Store more user-friendly. Highlights include Apple Pay on PS5 and PS4, a rating system based upon verified purchases, accessibility tags for the PlayStation 5 Store, and passkeys. None of this addresses the elephant in the room, a mass influx of shovelware as well as copycat game listings purposely designed to scam players out of their money. However, Sony says that it's not done just yet, and more improvements are on the way with the ultimate goal of making it easier for players to find their next favorite game. Keep an eye out for even more improvements that we'll be working on to continue involving the player experience. So they don't specifically mention that they're going to be fixing this problem that I would say is the biggest problem with the PlayStation Store, these just kind of scam games and shovelware garbage games. Hopefully that is on the list, right, of things that Sony's going to try to improve. They can't get rid of it all. Some of these games are actually not bad, and they're genuinely developers trying to put out, real products. But, unfortunately, it just gets kind of mixed in with all this other garbage that, it's clearly just people looking to just kind of scam, or play the system or whatever. And yeah, I do hope that this is something Sony cleans up because I think, I'll be honest, I don't really go on the PlayStation Store anymore because of this. Because every time I do, I'm just met with all of this junk and shovelware, and it's like I don't even know what I'm looking at half the time. So I barely interact with the PlayStation Store because of that. But there is a little bit of hope here. But the final topic we're going to talk about here is an acclaimed first-party PS4 exclusive will apparently be getting a movie adaptation. This is being reported by PlayStation Lifestyle. PlayStation has released several TV shows and films based on its beloved franchises, from The Last of Us to Until Dawn. The company doesn't seem afraid to bring even its less popular properties to life. That notion seems to continue with a recent report. According to video game insider Daniel RPK, Sony Pictures and PlayStation Productions are making a film adaptation of the acclaimed PS4 action-adventure game The Last Guardian. There is no additional details about the project, which may indicate that the film is in the very early stages of development. So I just wanted to take a moment to let you guys know about this because I did see it making the rounds, and yeah, The Last Guardian is a game that a lot of people love, and I don't know how people feel about it being potentially converted into a live-action film of some kind, but there you go. Sony and PlayStation Productions are continuing to just kind of go through these PlayStation games and this PlayStation IP and see what they want to bring to, to either the movie format or the TV format. So let me know how you feel about The Last Guardian potentially getting a film. That's going to do it for the video, though, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it informative. If you did, be sure to leave it a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new, hit the bell notification icon, and feel free to share this video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.